Why does Vermont hate e-cigarettes? Public health officials in our state are developing a new education program to be launched in January that will focus on young people and the risks of e-cigarette use. E-cigarettes, we are told, are highly addictive and can serve as a gateway to tobacco smoking. This is why in 2016 the Vermont legislature passed a 92% tax on e-cigarettes. But how do we square these efforts with the very real fact that just this year, Vermont became the first state in the nation to legalize marijuana via legislative action? Tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, exploits our essential neural pathways and modifies the way the brain retrieves memory, regulates metabolism, and processes pleasure and happiness from everyday life. THC rewires our critical cognitive system, and it adversely affects how we eat, learn, and form healthy interpersonal relationships. This is particularly problematic for young people who are still developing. Shouldn't these adverse effects of THC alarm our state's health officials who are concerned about youth substance abuse and addiction? The American Medical Association reports that heavy marijuana use in adolescents causes persistent impairments in neurocognitive performance and IQ, and its use is associated with increased rates of anxiety, mood, and psychotic thought disorder. Since signing the marijuana legislation earlier this year, our Republican Governor, Phil Scott, has consistently argued that people should be free to do what they wish in the privacy of their homes. Now, this was the argument that was used to strike down sodomy laws in the early 2000s, but that reasoning cannot be applied here. Sure, one is free to smoke marijuana in the privacy of his or her home, but when he steps outside, he brings the THC with him in his blood. A quick note for those of you who are inclined to engage in alcohol whataboutism. Unfortunately, alcohol consumption is entrenched in societies across the world. It will never be regulated away. No matter what policies or measures are enforced, no matter what regulations are passed, individual error and human flaws will ensure that we as a society cannot escape the negative costs of alcohol abuse. This includes drunk driving related accidents and fatalities, alcohol fetal syndrome, domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault, on and on. Marijuana abuse, and yes, it will be abused, will not substitute the negative externalities caused by alcohol abuse. It will only compound them. But it is crucial to remember here that in our discussion, we're not debating what is worse. We just want to understand the state's systemic derision of e-cigarettes while liberally endorsing marijuana. From a medical perspective, neither alcohol abuse nor nicotine addiction, and obviously not THC addiction, is healthy for any individual. For some time now, Democrats in Congress have been fighting for aggressive regulations on the sale of e-cigarettes. In this mission, they have found a willing ally in Big Pharma. Companies like Johnson & Johnson and GlaxoSmithKline favor stringent regulations on e-cigarettes because their own nicotine replacement products, nicotine gums or nicotine patches, are struggling to compete against e-cigarettes in the market. E-cigarettes actually have a good use. In April 2016, the British Royal College of Physicians published a study which stated that e-cigarettes are a safer alternative to smoked tobacco. The study also found that e-cigarettes are used, quote, almost exclusively by confirmed smokers, and therefore they function as a very effective means of quitting smoking. Kevin Williamson's recent essay called The Snob Party in the National Review gets to the heart of the issue. Williamson makes a really interesting distinction between one who has cultivated tastes like classical music or gourmet cuisine, and the snob. He writes, "The snob is obsessed with his own discernment relative to the low and vulgar tastes of those around him." Williamson continues, "The snob is the kind of man who sees a pair of Wranglers and sneers at the life he imagines they represent. $42,000 a year, a tract house, SUV, work boots, Garth Brooks, and Donald Trump." In Vermont, the wealthiest towns are Democratic strongholds. Let's look beyond Burlington. In Windsor County, the wealthiest towns of Norwich and Woodstock are good examples. In Bennington County, we have Manchester and the surrounding towns. And in stark contrast, the rural and very economically depressed Northeast Kingdom tends to fall right of center on the political spectrum. So I believe Williamson's argument really fits well into our discussion here. Cigarette smoking signifies the lower classes, the uneducated and unwashed masses, the people to whom Democrats condescend. And therefore, the war against e-cigarettes is an ideological one, not just that of public health concerns. Let's delve into the symbolism of the cigarette a little further. Beginning in the early 20th century, Hollywood positioned the cigarette as the quintessential emblem of American masculinity. Rugged, reliable, and rebellious. Kirk Douglas said, quote, "At that time, everyone smoked. The cigarette was the favorite movie prop." Indeed, the cigarette was ubiquitous on the American screen by the 1950s, and that's when Philip Morris launched the iconic Marlboro Man campaign. The Marlboro cigarette-smoking cowboy was depicted as a tough workman. He had a pioneer spirit of the Wild West and seductive charm. The campaign made the product synonymous with an aspirational brand of American masculinity, the very brand that the cultural gatekeepers of today despise. So what should we do? The first step is awareness. A very wise man once said that politics is downstream of culture. The battle over e-cigarettes is not one of public health. Were that the case, marijuana would still be illegal in our state.